Hi guys, welcome to another crochet tutorial with me, Laura, and in one of my previous videos I showed you how to make a tiny pear for Yarn Scrap Friday, but in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make the tiny apple. So let's begin. So for this tutorial we're going to use some red yarn. You can obviously use green yarn or any other colour that you like really. You may even want to make a pumpkin or a tomato, but we're going to use some red yarn for a little red apple. So I'm also going to need a little bit of brown yarn and a little bit of green yarn for a tiny leaf as well. And this is a sport baby weight yarn, so it's a yarn weight of 2, but you can use any yarn that you like. It will just make a different size apple. But with this yarn I'm using a 3mm crochet hook, and you'll also need a pair of scissors and a yarn needle as well. Okay, so let's begin. So we're going to start off with the red yarn, and we're going to either do a magic circle or a 4 chain loop. So I'll do a 4 chain loop to help beginners, and we're just going to start off with a slip knot, and we're going to chain 4. So let's move my yarn. Chain 4, so 1, 2, 3 and 4. We're going to put our hook into our first chain. Bring the yarn through the first chain and straight through the loop on your hook, and you've got a tiny little loop of chains, and into there we're going to work 7 single crochet. So this pattern's in US terminology, so in UK terminology that's a double crochet. But we're going to start off with a little chain 1, don't count that as a stitch, and putting your hook into the centre. Be careful not to put it into the first chain, right into the centre. Bring the yarn through, then wrapping around the chains we do a single crochet. We want 7 of those, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. Okay, and hopefully you may even be able to just pull in that hole if you've carried your tail yarn. But once you've got 7 single crochet, we're not going to join the round, we're not going to slip stitch to join, we're just going to go straight into our first single crochet and do 2 single crochet. So putting your hook into that first single crochet, we're going to work 2 single crochet straight away. 1 and another one in there, 2. We're going to do 2 single crochet in each stitch around, so that's making a stitch count of 14, so we're doubling up. Let's go into the next stitch, do 2 single crochet, 1 and 2, and do that all the way around, so 2 in the next stitch. You may want to count up to 14 or use a stitch marker if you prefer. 5 and 6. And 7 and 8. Then 9 and 10 in the next stitch. 11 and 12. And lastly, 13 and 14. 13 and one more, 14. Okay, so hopefully you got a bigger circle. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to do 1 single crochet in each stitch around, so keeping a stitch count of 14, and we're going to do that for 3 rounds. 1, 2, 3, 3 rounds. So go straight into the next stitch. Do 1 single crochet and work 1 single crochet in each stitch around, keeping a stitch count of 14. I'm going to do that for 3 rounds. Okay, 3 rounds. So I should do that, then I'll come back. And 4 and the last stitch 14. So I've done 1 single crochet in each stitch round, keeping a stitch count of 14. I did that for 3 rounds. So hopefully you've got a tiny little red bowl. And what we're going to do now is we're going to single crochet 2 stitches together to reduce our stitch count back down to 7. So I'm going to do the invisible decrease because it's a little bit smoother. So to do that, we go into the next front loop only, then over to the next front loop, bring the yarn through, and then do a single crochet. That single crochets 2 together, and it's nice and smooth. So I'm going to do that all the way around until we've got a stitch count back down to 7. So we should do it 7 times. That's 2. You might want to flatten your work as you go. Next one. 3. It's a little bit fiddly. 3. Next 2. 4. 2, 5. Next 2, 6. And the last 2, 7. Okay, so I was going to bring up a loop, and now what you want to do is you want to stuff your tiny apple. So we're going to take some yarn scraps and just pick some similar colours that won't stand out too much. So some darker colours like red. And we're going to stuff our tiny apple with some blunt scissors if I can find them. So making sure your working yarn is kept out of the way. I'm just going to use some yarn scraps and stuff. But you can use toy stuffing as well, that's absolutely fine. So I should do that and then I shall come back. Okay, so finished stuffing our little apple, and what we're going to do now is we're just going to cut our yarn and leave a little tail for sewing the remaining hole closed. Just pull that thread out and then grabbing a yarn needle, we're going to sew the remaining hole closed by going into the next stitch, out through the next stitch. So we're going to drawstring it closed. Do that again, go into the next stitch, out through the next stitch. Just do that all the way around until the hole disappears. And then once it's closed, we're going to go up through the middle, then down through the centre, hide our tail end. Cut our yarn. Okay, so we've basically got a tiny little red ball, and all that's left to do now is to add a little tiny stem and the leaf. So we'll do the stem first. So we're going to grab some brown yarn, and you just need a tiny length of brown yarn. We're going to tie a knot in one end. Try and get it near to the end as possible. We just want to cut down the excess yarn as close to the knot as possible. You can use all these tiny yarn scraps for stuffing. And then grabbing a yarn needle, thread that on, then coming up through the bottom, out through the top. It should catch on the inside and disappear, and then we just cut our little stem to length. That's maybe about here. Okay, so like that. So all that's missing now is our teeny tiny leaf. So for the leaf, I'm just going to put that off camera for now. For the leaf, I'm going to get some green yarn, and we're going to chain 4 for the leaf. So just do a little slip knot, chain 4, chain 1, 2, 3 and 4, and in your second chain from your hook, so don't count the loop on your hook, so first is our second, in there we're going to do a slip stitch, so tiny little slip stitch. Then we're going to yarn over, and in the next chain we're going to do a double crochet. So in UK terminology that's going to be a treble. So we go into there and do a double crochet. And then in the very last chain we're going to do a slip stitch again. So we end up with this really tiny little leaf. And I'm going to cut our yarn. And then all you have to do is then sew this onto your apple. Just going to pull that through. Grab our yarn needle. And we're just going to sew both ends into the top of our apple, down through the bottom. Do the same for the other tail end. Out through the bottom. There we go. And you may want to just sew these in a little bit more so they're a bit more secure if you're giving them to someone to play with. But for just decoration purposes, we're going to trim the tail ends down so they disappear on the inside. And there is our tiny little leaf. And there we go. It can go with our other tiny little apple. And like I said, you can make these in green as well if you want to. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Hope you managed to follow along and make some teeny tiny adorable little apples. You can also make them in green or any other color that you want to. And they probably also work as maybe little pumpkins or tomatoes as well. So have a real play. But I will see you next Friday for another Yarn Scrap Friday tutorial. And I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon supporters for helping make this happen. So don't forget to check out my Patreon channel and find out how you can support me and enjoy lots of exclusive benefits over there. So I will see you soon for another crochet tutorial. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.